Tick's new gadget, Last Hurrah, lets you go invincible for a whole second, and then afterwards explode, dealing 1000 damage to everyone around you. Now, compared to Tick's other gadget, this is going to be a lot better, and you're going to see a lot more value out of it. But just how much better is it? Are there some times when you would want to use the old gadget? I'm going to talk about all of that in this video, as well as some extra cheese strats that you can pull off with this new gadget. So if we want to see just how good this gadget is, we need to compare it to his old gadget. So with that gadget, Backup Mine, you are able to dash 3 tiles forward, and it takes you exactly a half a second to fully complete that dash and then get your movement back. So that means you're moving about 6 tiles per second on average, and you compare that to Tick's normal movement speed, which is 2.4 tiles per second. So that's about a 150% speed boost that you essentially get for a half a second. So this is obviously great for dashing away from situations where you're about to die, like if a Mortis or any other close range brawler suddenly gets near you. On top of that, you also drop that mine where you're standing, so you also have the potential to deal an extra 700 damage to whoever is attacking you. Usually that doesn't make much of a difference, but in very few cases it may be the deal breaker between you getting a kill and you not getting a kill. So we compare that to this new gadget, which doesn't give you any dash, it doesn't change your movement speed at all, but you do get that invincibility for 1 second. So in that 1 second time span, since you have a 2.4 tiles per second movement speed, you're going to basically be able to travel 2.4 tiles freely without your opponents being able to hit you. And that's already pretty close to the 3 tiles that you got from the Backup Mine gadget. You're just doing it a bit slower, but you are invincible while you're doing it. And then of course the 1000 damage that you can deal with this new gadget is better than the 700 damage that you can deal with the old gadget. And the explosion that happens after your invincibility shield wears out actually explodes in a 2.25 tile radius. So that's a 4.5 tile diameter circle that is going to take this damage and be pushed back. And that's actually pretty large. You don't have to be directly on top of these people to actually deal damage and push them back. Do keep in mind though that you don't break walls with this explosion. Even though it's an explosion, you would think that it would break these flimsy wooden boxes, but I don't even know. But that pushback effect is actually a pretty significant advantage over the previous gadget, because that's going to let you pull off some really nice plays. You can use it for defense and Brawl Ball to force your opponents to drop their ball. You can use it whenever one of your opponent's close range brawlers comes near you, because not only are you going to be invincible and soak up some of their attacks, but they can't stay on top of you, or they're going to take damage and get pushed back. So even though you can't completely dash away from the situation, you can still give yourself a favorable matchup because you're just going to be invincible. And if we think about how this gadget works against the Mortis matchup, if you time it right and use this gadget right before they attack you, then they're going to waste that first attack because you're going to be invincible. And then what do? If you're about to explode in a second, they have to waste another attack to dash away. So that's 2 attacks that they just wasted, not dealing any damage to you. So they're going to have no ammo left, and they won't actually be able to kill you within a reasonable amount of time. As long as you're not completely alone, your teammate should be able to help you out and finish off that kill on the Mortis, or yourself, because you can just throw a bunch of mines on top of yourself, and then the Mortis will die eventually. But if the Mortis doesn't waste their second attack to dash away, then they just stay on top of you, and you get a free 1000 damage, and you push them back, which is going to stun them for a brief period of time, which should also give you an advantage in that matchup. So either way, this should be a huge help in the matchup against Mortis, and sort of the same reasoning against all the jumping brawlers like Crow, El Primo, Edgar. If you use your gadget right before they land, then you can soak up all the damage that they're dealing when they are going to land, and once again, they either have to run away, in which case you'll be good to go, or they just stay on top of you, and then they're going to take that pushback as well as the 1000 damage. So this is going to make Tick a lot more consistent, because if your opponents are able to ambush you a lot, you won't just instantly die, and so the matchups for Tick become less polarizing when you have this gadget to balance that out. And it's not even just good as a hard counter, it can be good against a lot of brawlers, because invincibility, while you're still able to move, is always a pretty solid tool to have. But just stats wise, it really outshines his old gadget. It does more damage, and you're probably going to be dealing damage a similar amount of times. You might be using this newer gadget more for the invincibility, so maybe you won't be doing the damage as often, but a lot of times even just the threat of being able to do 1000 damage is really good for giving your team an advantage, whereas just a tiny little mine with your old gadget isn't much of a threat at all, because they can easily play around that. So this new gadget is basically just going to be better in all situations. It serves a relatively similar purpose, so in those cases you can usually pick one or the other, and it's just going to be better all the time. In this case, Last Hurrah is just going to be better all the time. But not only can you use this gadget defensively to defend against brawlers who try to ambush you, but you can also cheese some people by using it offensively. So for example, in Brawl Ball, if you're ever closing in on their goal and a lot of your opponents are basically clumped up towards the goal, you can quickly kick the ball off a nearby wall, activate your gadget, and then the ball will come right back to you, and then you start walking towards the goal with your gadget activated. Now you're just going to be invincible. So if your opponents try to attack you, they're just going to be wasting their ammo. So you get a free bit of movement to walk that ball closer to goal, and then after that 1 second ends up, you're going to do that explosion, and so your opponents will be pushed back and they won't be able to attack you in that time. So that buys you a lot of time to be able to walk this ball closer to the goal. And actually, I went through some footage of this new gadget, and it looks like people are stunned for almost exactly a second when you use this pushback effect. And since you're invincible for a second beforehand, that means you get about 2 free seconds to walk straight towards the goal with a ball in Brawl Ball if you use your gadget. So I think that's a play that can actually come up pretty often. Usually you don't want to play too aggressive and rush the ball in the goal with tick because you have such low health, but crazy stuff happens in Brawl Ball all the time, and you can easily be put into a situation where you're near the goal because your opponents are just forced so far back onto their side. Now, another really good way to use your gadget offensively, this idea actually came from Reddit. The user AndersonJW17 posted a video of them using this gadget to essentially push the opponent into their super. So they throw their super behind them, immediately use their gadget, and then their opponent is pressed against the gas because this is showdown, and so they end up walking closer towards the tick, and they walk just past their opponent, so that way when they explode, they push them backwards. And so they went right into the tick head and got dealt a ton of damage, and because of that, they just died. So this specific situation might not come up too often because if you're not in showdown, then they won't have that gas pressed up behind them, so a lot of times they'll just run away from you. But this idea of using your gadget at the same time as your super can definitely come up. If you use your super like right next to you and then walk up towards the same person that your super is targeting and use your gadget, you can essentially make it so that there's 2 walking bombs coming at them from opposite sides, and in that situation, no matter which way they run, they're either going to run into your gadget or they're going to run into your super, or preferably both. But either way, you're going to be able to get a pretty large advantage on them because you're going to be able to push them back and stun them for that period of time, and as long as you have some teammates for support, you can easily turn that into a kill. But keep in mind, you typically only want to do these gadget uses offensively if your opponent doesn't have any sort of close range brawlers on their team, like Edgar's or Mortis's, because you're going to get a lot more value if you use it against those brawlers in particular. So overall, Tick's new gadget is definitely so much better than the old gadget, and there's a lot of new opportunities and even offensive plays, not just defensive plays, that you can use with this gadget. If you want to see other in-depth guides about specific brawlers mechanics, I have a pretty big playlist of those kinds of videos right here, so make sure to go check that out. But that's all for today, guys, so see you later.